So I always like to start with a thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for making time to log on to what is another Industry Insider webinar series. My name is Pam Perschetti. I work in the Alumni Engagement Office at TCNJ, and this webinar series is brought to you out of the Alumni Engagement Office. I'm only going to mention one housekeeping item that we do plan to host Q&A at the conclusion of the discussion, so kind of a formal Q&A, but certainly as the discussion goes on, feel free to enter your questions into the chat. If there's a break and we can address the questions, great, and if not, we'll certainly address them at the end, like I said, in a more formal Q&A. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Dean of the School of HSS. Jane Wong is with us, and she wanted to make a couple of remarks and do a quick welcome. She was integral in putting this panel together, as all of our panelists are alums of the School of HSS. So thank you, Dean Wong, for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you. I know you wanted to welcome everyone.
Yes, welcome back to TCNJ on our virtual campus. I am delighted that your experiences seem very favorable while you were here at the college before my time, and that you are so passionate about matching your passions with your careers or finding passion in what you do, and that you want to share that joy and that path with our students. I think for our students, alumni engagement is so integral because they hope to be where you are in 5, 10, 15 years. So thank you so much for the gift of your time, and I look forward to the words that you will share with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Shannon Conklin. She is the Director of Career Development and Leadership at TCNJ. She has done us a huge favor by agreeing to moderate this panel for us. So looking forward to it. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here, to be speaking with this robust panel of alumni, to speak about their passions, to speak about their career paths. I'm excited, and obviously being the Director of Career and Leadership Development here at TCNJ, thrilled to have their story shared with all of you, to hopefully inspire, to give you advice, and to help you think about how you can bring passion into your own career or start to build that into your life overall. So how we're going to go about this is I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves first, and then after they conclude their introductions, we'll dive right into our first questions. I do have questions prepared for the panelists to speak to, and then as Pam mentioned, as there might be other questions that hopefully come from all of you in the audience, that we'll then also get to as well. We want to make sure that you get the most value possible from this discussion and our time together this afternoon. So with that, I'm going to ask if Christina Brady, if you could start with our introductions.
Happy to, and thank you so much for having us, everyone on the call who helped to organize the event. We really appreciate it. And I also wanted to thank everyone who's joining as a participant. All of you who are students and fellow alumni, you make us look so good. And so I just wanted to start out and give a big note of thanks for that. A little bit about me. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Insured Retirement Institute, which is a nonprofit trade association located in Washington, D.C. And I've been down here in Washington, D.C. since I graduated, more or less. When I was at TCNJ, I was a double major in English and sociology. And sociology was really the launching point for my first job, which was I had been doing quite a bit of research in the sociology department and working with a couple of different professors. And one of my sociology professors pointed me to this great think tank in DC that did research in healthcare and said, hey, if you love to do research this much and you really want to work in an industry that's mission driven, this sounds like a great opportunity for you. And so I still have Dr. Lawson to thank for pointing me down to DC and to the company that I spent almost 15 years at before I came to my current position. Adriana, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Adriana Carrig. I am the founder and CEO of a brand called Little Words Project, which is all these little beaded friendship bracelets. If you are familiar with them, that's probably because it started really at TCNJ. I was a Delta Zeta sorority alum, and during my tenure at TCNJ, I created the first versions of these bracelets while I was there. And then once I graduated, decided to bring this concept of spreading kindness and self-love amongst women to the masses. Over the past 8 years, we've had incredible growth, doubling year over year since first starting this in my parents' basement to where we are now. We just moved into this new 10,000 square foot office space, still based out of Jersey. We employ women of all ages from Jersey. So we're big Jersey people. I graduated from TCNJ in 2012, where I majored in English and minored in communication studies, which, both of which led to really having this robust, essentially, career that kind of started with a dream. And, I've been working obviously very hard ever since then to keep that dream alive and to, as I mentioned, bring that kindness to women and people really of all kinds, shapes, sizes, colors, everything. So just really excited to be here and to share kind of my little unconventional pathway towards a career and finding passion in that career. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Adriana. Ray, if you would please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Ray Drake. I am the Vice President of State and Local Government Affairs for UPS. I also manage the Community Relations team for UPS. I've been with UPS for 46 years. I graduated from TCNJ in 1979 with a degree in political science. How did I start at UPS? Started loading packages while I was a sophomore in college. Started loading packages in trailers at the UPS facility in Trenton, New Jersey, and have been there ever since. And probably the fun fact is, and I don't know if it's a fun fact, but the interesting thing is, how did I get there? Well, I just happened to have a close family friend, matter of fact, so close that I called him Uncle, all right? And he was a delivery driver for UPS. As a matter of fact, at that time, he had been a delivery driver for quite a few years at UPS. And he said, hey, I know you like to work hard. I was the type of kid, I always had jobs. I was always a hard worker. He says, I know you like to work hard. Why don't you go check out UPS? Great part-time job. So I went down, been there ever since. But the other fun fact is I have never went on an external job interview in my life. Only internal ones at UPS, that's it.
Honestly, same kind of.
And this is so interesting, and I appreciate that. And these are the types of pieces that showing the growth opportunities right within organizations and the range of functions and the ways that you can identify opportunities too. So thank you so much, Ray. And Alison, please, I'll turn over you now as well to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Alison Finley. I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Motown Records at Universal Music Group. My major at TCNJ was Law and Justice, and I attended New York Law School. The starting point in my career was really a lot of internships, just especially in entertainment. Anybody that would hire me, I would work for free. And so I worked at a law firm whose biggest client was 9 Inch Nails. I was their assistant for many years. I worked at Island Records because my favorite band was U2. So I was trying to figure out how to get into that record label. And then when I was at that label, I met another lawyer whose friend happened to just start with U2's managers and they were going on tour. So she referred me over there and I got to intern for U2's management company while they were on tour. That's what led me to the start of my career. And then fun fact that led me into the world of hip hop. Is I was about 4 years into my career, and my first client's manager came to me and said, Jay-Z's producer is looking for a lawyer if you're interested. And that producer turned out to be Kanye West. So if any of you have watched the new documentary Genius on Netflix, you'll see me as a young lawyer in episode 1, signing Kanye to his first record deal. And he remained my client for 10 years.
Wow.
I think if you can see the expressions on even our panelists, we're like, wow. Yeah. So example right out of the gate of the strong stories that we're about to hear. So thank you all for those introductions and those fun facts in the background. And I hope already those in the audience are already getting some ideas of how to start, where to go, and some of those options. So our first question, and we'll actually start with you, Alison. For those wondering where to start in their career or to start making a change, what have you found that can add value and meaning to one's career development?
I mean, I think to start, and I always kind of look back at my development, you know, even starting in high school and in college, it's just, I don't know what they talk about today, but back then, no one really talked about in career development that you could work in a place that you love, you know? So I always grew up as the biggest music fan. Like, I'm the person that gets in the car and I turn the radio station or satellite until I find like the perfect song. It drives everybody crazy. I'm like, how can you sit in a car and listen to a song that you don't love? But I never thought I could have a career in music. And I was in law school, went to law school because I was interested in law and justice, and just figured I'd go and figure out my career. And I walked into a panel on the music business and thought, oh my God, you can be a lawyer in the music business. That's what I'm doing. So, and everybody told me, don't do it. Don't try to get into music. It's impossible. They don't hire anybody out of law school. And I figured all right, I'm going to give it a shot. I have to at least try. And so I think I touched on it at the beginning. I did internships and made connections, and I wasn't somebody who loved networking. I didn't grasp the concept of asking someone that you don't know to help you. I found it strange. Like, why would you talk to me? You don't know me. Why would you help me? So it was just sort of pounding the pavement and doing those internships, finding any way. And I think that networking was definitely the number one thing. I think, coming to panels like this and reaching out, I can tell you that there's, anybody that reaches out to me, I talk to them, because I feel like there's so many people that don't reach out. So I know plenty of people who've gotten internships, even at Universal Music Group, by going to a panel discussion and approaching, for example, our general counsel, because how do you get past all the resumes that flood into, our company? Unfortunately, it's connections. And I didn't really have any, it wasn't like I was connected to anybody in the entertainment business. A lot of people, know somebody, or it's like someone's uncle is Jimmy Iovine, or, someone big in the business. But it turned out to be my best friend was the person that got me my job. I had been talking to her in law school, and she said to me, well, what are you trying to do? I said, I want to get into the music business, but I'm not having any luck. I'm sending all these resumes and I'm not getting any responses. And she said, well, I think my cousin works in the sales department at Island Records. Do you want me to call her? And I was like, yeah, I want you to call her. And that was it. And I handed my resume, and she walked the resume into, the legal department. And funny story. So my boss, when I was an intern over 20 years ago at Island, hired me 5 years ago at Universal Music Group as a lawyer. So, you make those lifelong connections, and you have to just follow up and keep on them once you get that connection.
Excellent point. And I will add a plug for TCNJ Link, which is a way you can really dive into the power of the TCNJ network, as again, evidenced by this panel in and of itself. Is there another panelist that would like to also add any advice that they have? Ray, I see your hand. Yes, please.
Yeah, to sort of piggyback on Alison's comments, and her path and my path were very, very different. But I will tell you this, the importance of networking, and even networking within an organization is really important. And through that networking, looking for the opportunities that might be there. And I've always been a firm believer that, if you are an opportunity seeker, where, you're actually on the lookout for different opportunities and willing to engage and help and get involved with something that might not even be, say, a direct responsibility. Maybe it's another project or something else that's going on within an organization, can be very helpful. And, Alison mentioned how she was doing these things and, working at these organizations for free. Well, a very good friend of mine happens to be a former head coach of the St. Louis Rams, Mike Martz. I don't know if you remember him. He got to the Super Bowl, won it as an offensive coordinator, lost it as a head coach. But when Mike left college coaching, his first job was with the LA Rams as a receivers coach, pro bono. He did it for free. And that's where he ended up. And so you never know what sort of opportunities that you can get engaged with. And it might not look like anything that's financially strong at the onset. And maybe it's actually a financial liability to start if you're not getting paid for a job that you might have to commute to. But you never know where this might end up.
Adriana or Christina, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think I would only add that I do think it can be really daunting to think about a change, to start the search, all of those things. And where do you begin? When I decided I was going to leave the company I had been at for 15 plus years, I felt that sense of, gosh, I don't know where to begin. And so the one tangible thing I would recommend is give yourself little goals. So I set a goal for myself every week. I'm going to do one thing to help my search make progress. Sometimes that was reaching out to someone and getting coffee with them whose career I admired and I wanted to pick their brain. Sometimes it was sitting down for 30 minutes and doing the resume churn. Okay, I'm going to send out resumes to 15 places. Sometimes it was attending a session like this to just get a little bit of inspiration, get a couple more ideas. But make sure you're giving yourself those goals that feel tangible and that help you see the progress that you're making, because it does add up and it gives you a place to start.
Yeah, now I would just say, to kind of piggyback on all of that is, if goal setting feels daunting, that's okay. I'm a person who I'm like a little bit of like a chaotic energy, and that's okay. I think a lot of people make you feel like you can't necessarily, be successful unless you're super organized or super intentional about, every step you take. And you can, in fact, be a little bit more kind of fly by the seat of your pants. There is a path that you can go down. I just want to make that clear, because Christina, while I would love to also be someone who can sit and be like, every week I'm going to do something, I just know how those weeks end up, right? For me, at least. And I'm like, I don't want to feel like I didn't put my best foot forward that week because I missed a goal, right? So just give yourself grace, give yourself kindness, and also treat others with kindness. I think that a large part of my career that is a little bit more unconventional, as we've mentioned, that I owe my success to really is having led with kindness from the very beginning. When I first launched the brand, I leaned on friends of mine from, TCNJ, who I had a person from TCNJ created my website. A person from TCNJ did my first marketing video, none of which were like my best friends, but just people that I had met in passing and was nice to, and that they were nice back to me. And as someone, a little bit about my background story is I grew up getting bullied my entire life. And that's why I wanted there to be something all about spreading kindness and self-love, specifically amongst women. So I always leaned into the people that extended their kind hand, and in return, I did the same. And I think that really led to making the networking part a little bit easier. If you go into a networking room, or if you're in a situation and you're intimidated by that concept as a whole, don't look at it as anything more than just being nice to the people around you. And that niceness and that kindness goes a long way, and they'll remember you down the line when you're hoping to nail a certain certain interview or get that opportunity, you never know who you were nice to along the way that is going to be more than willing to help you when the time comes. Oh, and that's my automatic light going off. That's my cue.
So Adriana, you're talking a little about like this kindness value, if you will. So how can one's career be a conduit to passion? So if you're passionate about being kindness to, integrating that kindness value, for example, how does this apply to your own career journey and success? If you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah. So my journey kind of when it came to what I wanted to do, I was an English major, as I mentioned. I went into English because I thought it would be a really good kind of baseline for whatever future career I chose. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. When I graduated, I took the LSAT twice with the intention of going to law school. And, it was around the second round of taking the LSAT that I was starting to come up with this concept of bringing this bracelet idea to the masses, right? And I really wanted my LSAT score to tell me that I was like so a genius. I was going to go to Harvard, or I didn't want to go anywhere at all. So I was like, if my LSAT score isn't through the roof, I'm just going to shift away from law school. It wasn't through the roof, as you can see, but it all worked out as it should. So I was going to go to law school, and I just wasn't passionate about the concept of being a lawyer. I wasn't passionate about really anything besides knowing that I wanted to help other girls who maybe had gone through what I had gone through my entire life, which, as I mentioned, was pretty severe bullying from a very young age that continued on through college. And I don't know if any of our panelists are a part of Greek life at TCNJ or just in general. Unfortunately, that can lead to it makes a small school even smaller, and it can lead to just negativity, unfortunately. Luckily, I had a really wonderful experience within my chapter, a wonderful sisterhood, and that's what led to me wanting to bring sisterhood really to the world at large. So as far as the passion piece, I just knew I wanted to love what I do. I knew that I wanted to wake up every day and feel like I wasn't going to work. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and I just knew that I wanted to create my own life, the way that my parents had. And that's not to say that if you go a conventional route and you work in an industry that is a little bit more, organizational. I mean, if you work at UPS, doesn't mean you can't have passion in what you do, right? Because there's, I think, ways to lean into that passion regardless of where you work. But for me, I knew that I wanted it to be my career. So I just kind of led with that, right? And I gave myself grace. And I had very supportive parents, which is helpful in that I wasn't having to go that conventional route, and they let me bead bracelets in their basement instead of going to law school. But it just goes to show that if you really do want to create something for yourself, you just have to be willing to do the hard work. So I created something that didn't exist so that I could have that passion fully at the forefront of my career. So it's really just a matter of deciding what's the most important to you.
Would any other panelists like to speak about how can one's career be a conduit to passion or vice versa, and how that applied to your own career journey and success?
I think I kind of went the opposite way, right? Like I followed my passion. I didn't. And I think a lot of people get into careers because they say, okay, well, I'm good at math, so I'm going to get into finance, or, and I think it's just also figuring out what you like to do within your career, right? So do you want to work with people? Do you want to travel the world? Like that can lead to passion too, depending on, you could be in finance, but you could be in a position that you're traveling. You can be, a lawyer and you can travel the world. You can, go to law school or not go to law school, like Adriana said, and now I'm chief operating officer of a company. So I think also, your career path can lead you into other things. Even just talking about career changes, I had lived in New Jersey and on the East Coast my whole life, and a position came up in California through a friend again that I had been talking to. And she said, you would never move to California, would you? And I said, well, for the right job, I would. And it turned out to be a career change. It was outside of music when the music industry had taken a downturn. And I thought, okay, well, maybe let me get into tech and then I'll have that background too. And I moved my whole family out to California, about 7 years ago. So I think you just kind of keep keep plugging along. And I think you can find things within your career that you're passionate about.
You know, I think there's an important piece with this, and there are jobs and there are careers. Your career, if your career is not your passion, you have a job, all right? And then I would recommend that you find your career, because then you'll find your passion.
Excellent quote there, Ray. Thank you for that. Well, I wanted to shift gears to another piece, which is when an individual identifies multiple passions. So what is your advice to find a balance between various interests and drivers in one's life to distill this into a career path? Christina, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So what comes to mind when I think about this question or this issue is the fact that most people, when they've mentored me about my career, have talked about a career as like a ladder, right? You're going to step onto the first rung, then you're going to step onto the next rung and the next one. And it's a straight line from the day you graduate to the day you retire. And there's this great leader in the finance industry, Roger Ferguson. For a long time, he was the president of TIAA. And Roger Ferguson says, stop thinking of it like a ladder. It's not a career ladder. He says to think of your career like a climbing wall. So yes, you are going to put your foot somewhere to start on the climbing wall, but then you have all of these options around you, to the left, to the right. Some are above you, some might be below you. And it's really thinking about, okay, how do I use the opportunities I got from this first starting position, and what paths does that open for me? And so that's what I would really say for anyone, is don't ever feel like a choice you're going to make in your career is going to pigeonhole you into one straight line. That's just not how it is. And I think if you think about it that way, it closes the range of possibility to you. And I refuse to be boxed in like that. And I don't think anyone should let themselves be boxed in like that.
Adriana, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it calls to mind my favorite quote by Steve Jobs. And it's that you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to keep going and trust that the dots will connect in the future. And that's really resonated with me through my career. And I'm going to speak about my husband, who actually also is a TCNJ alum, was in the finance school, and then ended up working for 8 years in private equity at Blackstone Group. And just this past July moved over to be our COO. That I cannot think of anyone more who has more passions. We call him a jack of all trade, master of none. And he is just constantly like wanting to do this and do that and do this and do that. And while he took that more kind of conventional road and went, the finance route, he has finally been able to, after, kind of putting in all that hard work and honing in on those passions, to make that shift working here. And it gives him a lot of room to build other things that fall into place in all of these different passions. So even if it's not like right out of the gate, you graduate, you get a job that you're the most passionate about, it might be that conduit to, getting to a place in your career, even if it's just a short 8 years away, to being able to then, build a life that you've always dreamed of. So as I said, it's really just, kind of keep putting that one foot after the next, or above or below. As Christina said, I love that rock climbing wall example. I think that's absolutely what it looks like. Because even if you are going to build your own thing, it sometimes feel like you're going, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back the entire time. And you just kind of have to be willing to trust and to, kind of see how those dots will connect for you in the future.
Ray or Alison, would either of you like to add anything? We can move on. There's actually a question that came in through the chat that aligns with another question that I wanted to bring up, which was considering the past 2 years and all of the changes, shifting to more digital work, hybrid work, a lot of things evolving, quite frankly, tied to careers and passions. How can our alumni and students identify whether their passions and interests align with an organization? Any advice that is specific to, again, how much has really evolved and continues to evolve given COVID, digital era, any of those elements? Would anyone like to start with that question?
I can speak to it. I will say that I feel like because of the digital era, as you just mentioned, Shannon, you can find out a lot about a company just by looking at their digital footprint. You can kind of take in how they're representing who they are and what their values are and what they stand for. It's really very obvious, I think, this day and age, as opposed to maybe in years past. And I know with Little Words Project, if you pull up our Instagram account or our Facebook or our YouTube, you'll get that behind the scenes experience of what this company is all about and what we stand for. Hopefully hits you right in the face when you come onto our website. If not, we're not doing a good job of our marketing. But you do kind of get an idea. Of course, there's always stuff that goes on behind the scenes that, you don't always get to see. And there's always culture, issues that take place no matter where you work. But I think it's a matter of just, doing your due diligence before you work somewhere, taking into account how they're presenting themselves to the public. And then also, does how they present themselves feel like something that you align with? And just, if that is important to you, making sure you look into that. That's not to say that there aren't companies that could help you build your resume and get to a bigger place in your career that maybe aren't the most amazing, culturally wonderful experiences ever, that still wouldn't be beneficial to your career growth, right? And I do think that it is beneficial to have some experiences at certain companies that maybe aren't the best, so that if you do move to somewhere else, you can kind of learn to appreciate when things are really great, So I think there's like a nice blend of how that path can look for you. And then, COVID was definitely a doozy for, I'd say, probably all of us on this call, myself included. And, we kind of weathered that storm, again, by using our social platforms to be transparent and call on our community to help us through the difficult time, and to keep our company thriving and, be able to not have to furlough and change things up too much. So I say, if you kind of just look and you will find what you're looking for, but you just have to kind of be intentional there.
Other advice related to how to navigate or how to see how your passions might have been impacted with this, or advice that you saw within your own organizations?
I think I can take that. I think it was a huge change for us in the music industry. For me, I started a new role at Universal right in the middle of COVID. So I met our staff on Zoom, and we didn't get together for some time, probably, 8 or 9 months before I met everybody. And so I think, when looking into careers and looking at different companies, I think it's important to look at, and it's a study that we're actually doing at my company as well, how people will continue to return to work. Because now a lot of companies are looking into, okay, they won't return in person at all, or they'll be hybrid, or there'll be certain positions that are permanently work from home. And so as you're just starting into your career, even for me, and I've been doing this forever, and I knew a lot of people in my company, it was challenging to be able to bond with people, particularly in a creative business. And Adriana, I'm sure you find this as well. Like when you're trying to be creative and you're on Zoom, it's just it's not conducive to that. So you see the energy and you really get to understand people. I think there was a lot of times where there was misunderstandings or misinterpretations being on Zoom in meetings and understanding what someone's real intention was, because they weren't with you and you couldn't read the body language. I just found it interesting, even just meeting people for the first time, like, oh my God, you're so tall. Like we have a woman that, on our staff who plays for the WNBA, and just your perception of people is skewed having these Zoom meetings. So I think it's important to look into companies and how they're returning their people to work, because I think it's really beneficial to, especially when you're first starting in your career, to be in person with people and not be remote. It's just a different connection.
I thoroughly agree with Alison. I do believe that there's a place for remote work, and there'll be maybe a certain mix of remote work. But I think the human interaction is extremely important. The best, most effective conversation about, moving the business forward is not necessarily at the conference room table. It's the conversations before it, after it, maybe on a break, where I think so much of the really meaningful improvement in whatever you're doing in your business really takes place. So, I do believe there's a place for remote work, but I really believe it needs to be a blend. And I think another thing also is, a well-established team, like a well-established team moving into the pandemic, can easily adapt to the Zoom situation. They all know each other, they've worked together. There's a trust element, a relationship element that is there. But if you just continue it on to Zoom and now people leave that group, new people enter, I don't think they'll ever going to establish those types of relationships with the prior group, if they just stay in a Zoom, virtual world.
I think I bring a slightly different perspective to this question. Like Alison, I started my current role, my current business during the pandemic. So in fact, my first day of work at IRI was their first day being fully remote. And so they handed me my laptop. They said, we'll probably see you in 2 weeks, and sent me on my way back to my home office. And I can't tell you that it went perfectly, but it went far, far better than I could have imagined. We are still remote. We just subleased our office space, so we have no intentions of returning anytime soon. And there are still coworkers who I haven't met in person. But I will say that when I do meet people in person, I've actually been surprised that they don't surprise me. Their humor is the same, their mannerisms are the same. I get the same sense of their personality. They are taller or shorter than I would have expected. I will agree to that. So I think sometimes it can depend on the kind of work you do and the kind of interactions you need to have with your coworkers. What we've decided for our business is that we are going to pick the moments to be in person, because that creativity absolutely benefits from in-person interaction. So what are the big strategic discussions we have to have across the year? Let's make those in person. Let's be really intentional about going out to coffee with one another or grabbing breakfast if we live in the same city. So we're going to take a slightly different approach to it and pick the moments to be together, but otherwise work remotely. And I think what I'm most excited about is a future workplace that lets us have some autonomy and flexibility about whether we're going to be remote or whether we're going to be in person.
To piggyback off of this discussion and align with that, the change going on right now, or that we saw the last 2 years, do any of you feel your passion for your work was impacted by the digital shift, or maybe looking at how to identify that hybrid or that approach or that future strategy, depending on your different organizations, which I'm hearing it depends on the organization, the function, the drivers. Does anyone want to start?
I would say for me, for sure. But again, it's dependent on the business, right? So I'm in the music business. Like, we're going out to see music. We're going to live concert events. Like, it's, that's what it's all about. It's all about the music and meeting with artists and, the connectivity to audiences. So yeah, there's been a definite impact to, the events and the things that we're able to do when you can't go to festivals and you can't go to concerts. It was definitely an impact on my passion for my career, for sure, because I don't want to sit on a Zoom. I want to be out, having meetings and listening to music, and it doesn't play the same on a Zoom meeting, so definitely, there was definitely impact for me.
I will say this, our business, we were, when the pandemic hit, we had a little bit of a 2-week lull where I think the world was sort of figuring out like what's going on. But after that, we were so busy. It was, I was working 7 days a week, literally for months, and just barely keeping my head above water. There was so many moving parts. And it probably took about 6 or 7 months to calm down.
Christina or Adriana, did you feel your passion for your work was impacted from the past 2 years?
No, my passion has not changed at all. It just made me more passionate, I will say. Luckily, Little Words Project and these bracelets and the concept of spreading and kindness and self-love only became more important through these past few years. I will also say that because we are a much smaller company, I only ever had about 30 employees in an office space at a time. We had to, through it all, kind of keep going. I had only a very short time where we moved to complete remote, but because of the nature of the creativity and because we're a nimble brand and kind of can make the decision as a group, this is what we want to do. We want to stay in the office. We were able to kind of weather that storm. And that's what I say when you're looking for those careers. And I think piggybacking on what Alison said is looking at how they navigate these kinds of situations, because if you are the kind of person that like needs that water cooler engagement, which I know every young woman on my team definitely does, then you can find those companies that are going to continue to do that. And if you're someone who can thrive independently and you can work remotely, and that's something that you actually would prefer, which I do have a couple of members of my team that did move completely remote and we're fine with that. Then you want to just lean into those careers, right? But yeah, for me, my passion hasn't changed at all since 2013, as far as believing in what we're doing. And I think that's where, what Ray said earlier about finding your career and not your job is going to make a big difference. And it feels like a heavy pressured statement because it's like, okay, yeah, obviously that's the goal. But you do want to make sure that you are being very intentional as you're moving in your career, that if you're finding that you're miserable on Zoom, you're probably going to also be miserable in the office, right? Because that's not the right fit for you. And you got to just lean into those moments and that realization and try to think, okay, well, when in the past few months have I felt alive? Have I felt that passion? What has lit me up, right? And if you can identify it, then let's look at all of the possible options of what I can do or where I can go, or, what side project I can start that will light me up. And then things kind of start to evolve from there. So no, my passion hasn't been affected. However, I can definitely see how some people's might if they're not living their true purpose through their career.
So I wanted to shift in our last about 15 minutes, and please, audience members, if there are questions that you want the panelists to address or speak to, please share those in the chat and we can get to them. I have one that came in as a pre-panel session question, which is, what words of wisdom do you have for high school students who are interested in the social sciences, such as psychology, but don't know what kind of career or profession they would consider after college? There's so many young students that say, I find this topic interesting, but I don't know what to do with it. So what advice would you have for, maybe the high school students or maybe freshmen, thinking of the younger cohorts?
I can take it to start. I mean, I think it goes back to, especially in the social science or psychology, what do you love, right? Or do you love sports, right? Because you could be a sports therapist. Do you love to work with children? It goes back to what you're passionate about, because I think you can find career in a lot of things that you love, right? So I think it's just kind of, and I think that's the point that I was making before, right? Where people think like, okay, well, I'd be good as a lawyer, or I'm good at math, so I'll go into finance, but you could go into finance, and work on Broadway. So it just, if you think about the things that you really want to surround yourself with and things that you love, I think that kind of puts you on a career path.
Yeah, I think the advice I would give is to remind high school students that they're going to have lots of wisdom that they're going to be able to encounter in the 4 years they spend in college, or the 5 years or 6 years they spend in college. When I think about my time at TCNJ, right, it was conversations with my professors before class or after class. It was talking to my club's advisors in a hallway and them telling me a little bit about their career path. It was, I worked in the admissions office while I was at TCNJ and speaking to some of the staff there, and then, right, like just these nuggets of wisdom, it all added up to a foundation that helped me figure out how I needed to move forward. And I think, especially for high school students, you're 18, there's a lot that you don't know yet. I'm 40, there's a lot I still don't know. So really opening yourself up to all the wisdom around you and absorbing it, it will clarify and clarify and clarify over time, and you'll get to a place where you feel really confident and comfortable going out into the post TCNJ world.
Yeah. I would just say expose yourself to as much as you can. And as you experience new things, I think I keep saying this, but give yourself grace and time, and just be okay with it not being perfect right away. And maybe, like I said, finding a job that leads to a job that leads to a job that leads to a career, just to keep piggybacking on Ray's comment there, because I think it's such a good nugget. But it's okay that things aren't perfect right off the bat, especially when it comes to like maybe what your major is. To use my husband as an example again, he came in as criminal justice, ended up going interdisciplinary business, ended up working in finance, ended up being the COO of a bracelet company. So at the end of the day, those things, like I said, they start to make sense going forward. So I think, for me, I wish, and I'm someone who struggles with anxiety, to speak on the mental health component of things. And I wish I could have gone back and told my younger self that it's going to be okay. Just kind of keep leaning into the things that matter to you at your core. And for me, that was always being kind. It was always helping the underdog. It was always, and then ultimately over time, I've been able to turn that into my career. And I think that, would I have gone back and maybe taken a couple more business courses? Maybe. Would I have not chose Math 101 as my math class simply because I hated math? Maybe. But it all worked out, because I ended up marrying the guy who did all the math part for me, and it was okay. But, I think it's my one thing, my piece that I wish I had done a little bit more is just exposing myself to even more. But it's okay if you find your inspiration. I was an English major, it's okay if you find your inspiration in a book you're reading on the syllabus. Like, that's okay, so just try not to pigeonhole yourself too much in thinking that, okay, well, I took psychology, so now I have to go and become a psychologist. That's not always necessary. And I think Alison's a good example of that too, right? You start in law, you end up becoming like, you get this really cool job and, at Motown Records one day. Like, it's all a journey. And you just kind of have to give yourself, almost be excited. Like, what are you going to be in 10 years? That's like an exciting thing. And just trust that each little step that you take is going to get you closer to your ultimate passion.
We had a question come in, given the discussion and the theme of networking and making connections. And again, one other plug for TCNJ link too for that. Having been mainly virtual and remote for the last few years, how would you encourage students to begin or strengthen their networking skills? Almost what advice would you have given your younger TCNJ self and how to start out networking? Because it can be intimidating to students. So what would you advise them? What's like one piece of advice for that?
I would say the way people have gotten in touch with me is LinkedIn. So, and I actually hate LinkedIn, but I do go on every once in a while. I don't even know why I don't like it. It just, for some reason, it stresses me out. But I'll go on and people will send me direct messages. And again, I was where they were, many years ago. So I think, I've had a number of different conversations, people reaching out on LinkedIn, or, my realtor ran into someone walking, on the Strand in LA, in California, and she asked me if I could speak to her friend's daughter. So I think it's just, again, putting it out to friends and family and looking on LinkedIn about things you might be interested in and companies, because if you look, you'll see your connections are connected to someone who's connected to someone in that company. And so that's what I would say is doing what people are doing today, what students are doing today, coming on these panels, and then, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. With the shift to remote, I feel like we're all in the, in the industries, we're all used to having quick Zoom calls. So if you did, I say more so than if someone were to ask me to go get coffee, like I'd look at my schedule and be like, even if I have the 10 minutes to get coffee, I'd prefer to not because I'd rather, like, I don't know, sit for 10 minutes. But I will get on a Zoom call because it's like easy. I can fit it into my day. And, if I were any of the panelists on this call and you're interested in talking to one of the panelists, any of the attendees, and you're interested in talking to one of the panelists, I would be messaging Shannon on the side, like, hey, let me get Adriana's email real quick, and that could be a quick, easy connection. And, I know that I just had a couple of calls with people that are just, just cold reached out, and I was able to make it happen. And now I find myself thinking about them in every passing engagement, so I know, okay, if I ever need someone who needs, custom printed cards, I can go to this woman I just had a call with yesterday who was just asking for advice. So it really helps to expand your network when you just kind of put yourself out there. And listen, you might not get an answer, you might not get one right away, but at least you're doing you're putting your best foot forward and that energy out there. And I think it will absolutely repay you in the coming years.
I can only imagine that there are people who are watching this who are thinking, I am an introvert. The idea of reaching out to someone who I don't know gives me such anxiety, I just won't do it. And so what I would encourage you to do, if you feel like you're in that boat, two ideas. One is start close to home and practice with people that you trust. So it could be someone at TCNJ, it could be a friend, it can be a relative, right? Just practice sitting down with someone and asking them about their career. And it doesn't matter what their career is, but just practice how you ask them those questions and how you lead a conversation to get information that's going to be useful for you. So practice is helpful if you're feeling a little daunted by that. And then the other thing is, maybe live communication isn't your strength. You're a writer, there are other ways that you prefer to communicate. I've had lots of people reach out to me on LinkedIn or over email, and we've traded ideas and thoughts in that format. And I'm happy to do that as well. And if it's more comfortable for you to do it that way, it's also a great path forward.
And Ray, what advice do you have thinking of your story at the beginning of this, of how you even got started at UPS and moving your way up? What advice would you like to add?
Well, as far as the networking in a digital environment, probably two things. One, whenever possible, get out and do some things face to face. All right, as those opportunities present themselves. But then I think in the Zooms, try to make a connection. If you see someone on a Zoom that, you want to connect with, get on the chat and send them that message, exchange email, cell phone number. Hey, really like to follow up on a conversation with this, and utilize those opportunities, because once that Zoom has ended, it might not be as easy to make that connection. And also I think, when you're on a Zoom call, be a participant. All right. Engage with the conversation, because I think that's how people are going to get to know you a little bit. Just being an attendee is probably not going to create those networking opportunities for you, as opposed to when all of a sudden you get engaged in the conversation, people get to see who you are, and, want to get to know you.
I think too, when in doubt, just be nice. Like it's just be friendly at the end of the day. If you don't even get to a part about your career, just people will remember how you made them feel, right? So just try to be kind always. And, it'll lead to maybe even just a genuine friendship that then results in they can give you actual help along the way. But I just lead with kindness. And even if you're introverted, you can always comment nicely about someone's outfit or, how their hair looks that day. And no matter who it is, I think everyone always resonates with just being kind.
Listen, I think also you have to practice, right? Like for me, I'm not a public speaker. And so I'm going to my son's career day at his school to public speak in front of 8th graders because I'm shy. Like I actually am. I don't like talking to people I don't know. I don't like talking in front of groups of people. If we were on a stage, it would be completely painful for me if we were but I'm practicing, right? Like I've been doing this for 25 years and I still don't like to speak in front of people, but I'm going to go to my son's middle school and sit in a classroom and talk about my career. So it's just that comfort level that once you start to do it, it doesn't become as terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm mindful that we have about 3 minutes until we wrap up. So I just want to share and Pam, I'll turn over to you if there's any final wrap up notes. But, what I'm hearing is 1, leverage your connections through TCNJ. This panel, the resources that we have, make those connections. And 2, I think what was underscored here as well is we can all relate, right? We can relate. There is the importance of networking, but we all have that varying levels of comfort too. And I think, Adriana, your point about leading with kindness, the other points about practicing the small steps, leverage the resources that are available to you. That's what we hear. That's what we're here to do, especially those of us TCNJ and this powerful alumni network. We're here to help. We're here to share our stories, here to share that advice as well. So I really want to thank all of you so much. On behalf of TCNJ and for myself, it was a pleasure to moderate this. It was a pleasure to hear all your wonderful stories. Lots of great advice that came through this. So Pam, I'll hand it over to you to formally wrap up.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I think at one point or another, all of these panelists have said something along the lines of reach out. So, and they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't mean it. So once the Zoom call wraps and the chat is gone, feel free to reach out to the alumni office, myself and my colleagues. If you lose all the other contacts, we can at least get you in the right direction. I did put in tcnjlink.org. It's a new networking platform, many of which our panelists are already on. So they have all stressed this. So I'm going to stress it as well. Take advantage of it. That they're here for a reason, and they said that for a reason. So certainly keep in touch with them and with our office and with the career development office after this has wrapped, and try to put to use some of the advice that they shared today. But I want to say thank you to our panelists for taking the time out. All of you obviously have very successful and busy careers, so thank you for taking the time to do this for TCNJ and for all of us listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.